And so when I rolled out Back on Track, a couple of years in, we learned that there was a participant who went out during the time he was in the program, committed a robbery. There was a horrible injury to the victim, and turned out that this individual was an undocumented immigrant. And there was an article that was written and said, Kamala Harris has created a program to shield illegal aliens. Right? And that's when my friends came really in handy to just say, it's, because I was upset about the unfairness and the mischaracterization and don't people want these things fixed? Don't they understand what innovation requires? And that's when you have to rely on your friends who understand what you do and care about you and will support you without judgment, but also give you critical feedback when you need it.
I think it's pretty clear that the friends she's referring to are the media, right? And since she's going to bring it up, I mean, think about it, honestly. How many times have we heard some media apparatchik defending the sacred right, the sacred honor of the mainstream corporate media? I mean, how many times were we told that even questioning the motives or questioning the quality of media reporting was a danger to democracy? You can't say fake news. You got to believe everything that they say. The media is a sacred part of democracy or whatever. And now, honestly, their behavior has become so scandalous and so transparently propagandist that it's basically impossible for even brain-dead leftists to ignore. I mean, the same media that pushed the Russia hoax, the same media that covered up and obscured the laptop is now the same media blatantly altering and manipulating interviews to fit their purpose. I mean, we all know what they did to basically try and pretend that Kamala Harris has half a clue during her 60 Minutes interview, right? We all saw that. And now we get to see that they'll even do that in an interview with the Speaker of the freaking House just to manipulate and push the message.
I assure you.
So, Speaker Johnson, I texted him, just asked him about that exchange last night, and he said, did you see CBS? And I said, no. So I put on Face the Nation. He says they edited his video. He says he'll never agree to it again.
Wow, just
he
like
said
60
they edited.
minutes.
He says they edited. He goes, on Face the Nation, it was even more direct, but they edited it out. He goes, I did the interview to they made Kamala look better. They edited my video to try to make me look less effective. I will never agree to a non-live interview with CBS again.
Journalistic malpractice. It's 60 Minutes did it. The flash, the cuts.
CBS again.
And we know they edit videos because we seen it last week what they did to Kamala. Completely took a question and latched into another answer. I don't know if that was ever okay in media.
But to the Speaker's point, Brian, that's why he will never do anything that is not live. That's the problem for us. We do everything live. Mm-hmm. We would like to fix stuff. We can't.
You remember Trump said that you're good when they take your long answer and they have to edit you down.
That's
versus
right.
Kamala, they have to edit her.
As we watch this, man, I think we have to recognize, man, I think we have to reconcile the fact that a lot of this is our fault. This is the fault of conservatives, man, because we have been bitching and moaning about all this stuff for at least a generation, man. We've been complaining about media bias, complaining about the double standard, but we haven't actually done anything about it. Our politicians haven't actually changed the way they interact with the media. They just complain about it, right? And then they just show up on some, Sunday show propagandists just Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. So really, it's their fault, man. It's our fault. We haven't actually held anyone accountable. But I think, honestly, if we're lucky, the Kamala Harris 60 Minutes fiasco was a wake-up call. And Speaker Johnson, he recently taped an interview with CBS. And honestly, man, if he and his staff hadn't taped their own copy of the interview, we'd never know. And we'd definitely never be able to prove just how corrupt they all are. And I'm going to keep going, guys, but if you appreciate content like this, man, help us grow. Help us get the message out. Like, share, subscribe. It really, really does mean a lot.
So that's a different accounting than this 2% you say was distributed.
Yeah, so they've obligated some funds, but they've only distributed 2%. The rescue and recovery effort's still going on, and then we address the rest of it.
So that's a different accounting than this 2% you say was distributed.
Yeah, so they've obligated some funds, but they've only distributed 2%. And when I was there on the ground, and you should go, bring the cameras and talk to the people there. They'll tell you, don't take politicians' words for this or the administration's word. Talk to the people there on the ground. They had not been provided the resources almost 2 weeks out from the storm that they desperately needed. And when I was there, 13 days post post the storm hitting that state, people are still being rescued. They're stuck in the higher elevations in the mountains because the roads are down and all the rest. So they need every available resource and all hands on deck. The rescue and recovery effort's still going on, and then we address the rest of it.
You got to ask yourself, man, is there a reason that CBS doesn't want their viewers to hear about the facts on the ground? They don't want you to hear about people, your fellow Americans, that have not been provided the resources that they desperately need, right? Why in the world would a news organization, why would they cut that out of a broadcast, man? Who actually stands to gain, and what is it that they actually stand to gain, right? Just ask yourself the same thing when it comes to illegals voting in Virginia.
You know that it is against the law for non-citizens to vote in federal elections. That's established law.
Of course it is. Of course it is. But here's the problem. There's a number of states that are not requiring proof of citizenship when illegals or non-citizens register to vote. We know that's happening.
But respectfully, Speaker,
everybody should want the law to be followed.
You know that it is against the law for non-citizens to vote in federal elections. That's established law.
Of course it is. Of course it is. But here's the problem. There's a number of states that are not requiring proof of citizenship when illegals or non-citizens register to vote. We know that's happening. Look, Glenn Youngkin in Virginia, I was going to say, he issued an executive order to clean up their voting rolls heading into the election. Less than 30 days out, a couple of days ago, the Biden administration, Department of Justice, Biden-Harris administration, sued the governor and the Commonwealth of Virginia to try to prevent them from cleaning up their voter rolls. See, that kind of thing creates a lot of doubt and concern in the minds of a lot of the American people. Why would they do that? Everybody should want the law to be followed. Yeah.
Why, man? Why is it that powerful propagandists at CBS do not want their viewers to hear about the federal government literally suing a state that is trying to clean non-citizens off of its voter rolls? I mean, that to me, that's the most interesting and questionable part of this entire story, man. I think most reasonable and objective people would find that pretty troubling, right? But they cut it out. I mean, why? Why do they not want you hearing about storm relief? I mean, they don't want you hearing about illegals voting. I mean, it's funny. I mean, they say, illegals can't vote because it's illegal, right? As if those laws have some imaginary force field, right? They do not want you hearing about any of this. And of course, I mean, they definitely don't want you hearing about illegal immigration until after November.
Wait a minute. Wait just a minute. It's not me undermining it. It's the actions of the Biden-Harris administration in some of these states. Non-citizens are not allowed to vote under federal law.
So if your issue is with certain governors, shouldn't you be talking to them?
Wait a minute. Wait just a minute. It's not me undermining it. It's the actions of the Biden-Harris administration in some of these states. Non-citizens are not allowed to vote under federal law. But the states have prohibited. We passed the SAVE Act, in the House. The SAVE Act says you've got to have proof of citizenship before you register to vote. And Chuck Schumer and the Democrats blocked that in the Senate. We could have prevented this. The questions that people have about that. But the Democrats chose not to. They opened the border wide. A lot of people theorized that was so that they could have non-citizens to vote. These are realities, Margaret. I wish it weren't true, but that's the concern that people have. And in Wisconsin, for example, some of the counties are. It is law, but that's correct, but we have to make sure the law is followed, and that is the whole point. That has always been the whole point of the SAVE Act and all the measures that we've tried to ensure. I believe, by my count, we have about 16 million illegal aliens in the country since Mayorkas and Harris and Biden opened the border wide, and because of that, there's concern, because those people are distributed all around the country, as you know. There's concern some of those people will try to participate in the elections. Look, some of our House races, I believe the Republicans are going to win the House, or the House majority, win the Senate and the White House. But in some of our House races, I have a colleague who was elected by 6 votes in 2020. Some of these are decided by hundreds or a few thousands of votes. So if you have non-citizens participating against the law, and you have no mechanism in some states to stop it, that is the root of so much of the concern. And of course, in California, they have ballot harvesting, right? Ballot harvesting is notorious for opening the door for fraud. In Wisconsin, they're going to put, in some counties, unmanned ballot boxes in public parks again.
So again, CBS News does not want the faithful to know that Republicans passed a bill focused on protecting the vote, your vote, and that the Senate refused to bring it up. Just like they don't want you to know that Republicans years ago now passed H.R. 2, which was an actual border bill. Not an immigration bill, not a pathway to citizenship bill, but a real border enforcement bill. And again, Senate Democrats ignored it. And honestly, this is not a video about the Senate, but I don't think we talk enough about the Senate. We're just so freaking focused, myopically focused on not having a socialist president, which I appreciate. I'm part of that. But we need the Senate, man. I mean, if we're going to have any opportunity to at least point ourselves in the right direction, we need meaningful, actual control of the entire government. And honestly, people like these CBS propagandists, they know this, right? This is why they hide important information from their viewers. And it tells us a lot about them, man. And I think it tells us a lot. I think it tells us that they recognize that the wide majority of normal people are going to resonate with the Republican agenda and going to resonate with the Republican message. I mean, who the hell doesn't want their vote protected? Who does not want their sovereignty intact? Chuck Schumer and the machine, they've had it too easy, man, and they've had it easy because these kinds of people are protecting them. And it's sad. I mean, honestly, man, this is what I mean when you've heard me talk about weak Republicans. We've been talking about this stuff for as long as I can remember, man. I've personally been watching the media manipulate information and narrative since the Bush presidency, right? And Republicans still play along. They still go on these shows. They still act as if this stuff's all just a fact of life. But I think they need to change their strategy, man. The media needs Republicans more than the Republicans need the media. I mean, the few people that just want to hear and watch leftists, they already have MSNBC, right? I mean, the Republicans, I believe, actually have the power here if they can figure out how to use it. And part of that, I think Speaker Johnson, I think he's on the right track. No more recorded interviews, only do live interviews and hold them accountable as often and as much as you possibly can, because no one wins when they're able to manipulate things at will, right? But we know why they do it, right? We don't have an honest, unbiased media, right? I think a lot of them probably believe that they're honest. A lot of them probably believe that they're unbiased, but these people have skin in the game and there's no denying. I mean, some of them, they even appear like they might even be scared right now.
The big headline, this is a national head-to-head poll, is that Vice President Kamala Harris had a 5-point lead in our last poll taken a month ago, right after the debate. That lead has all but evaporated, Willie. Take a look at this new head-to-head matchup, 48% to 48%. That is what we call a deadlocked race. It underscores what we all know, that this is tight, that the country is sharply divided. One of the other big headlines here, people are viewing the Trump presidency more favorably than the Biden presidency. Why is that significant? We've seen the vice president get pressed repeatedly on what she would do differently than President Biden, and she's really struggled with that answer.
That doesn't sound like reporting to me, man. That sounds like fear. And honestly, I don't know why they're so fearful now. I mean, they should have thought of this when their candidate was literally installed. When they chose Kamala Harris, that's when they should have been scared. I mean, literally every thinking person saw this unfolding. But I think the media really did believe that they could control it. They really do believe that you're stupid. They believe that they can convince you of anything. But obviously, they made a pretty massive miscalculation. They did not account for the friendly fire on The View.
Well, if anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
That really is the moment that every single leftist realized that they may as well be in some real trouble, right? If she can't handle The View, if a softball setup question from Sonny Hostin risked taking down the whole freaking program, then what did they think was going to happen? I mean, just honestly, consider the difference in quality and caliber of candidates. I mean, Kamala Harris essentially ends her campaign on The View and is now forced to go on Fox News to maybe, just maybe, survive and have a chance, right? But Trump and Vance, they've been challenged every step of the way. They've gone into the lion's den and they're winning, man. Everywhere they go, they're winning.
The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. a handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs, and Donald Trump is the problem and not Kamala Harris's open border? Americans are so fed up with what's going on, and they have every right to be. And I really find this exchange, Martha, sort of interesting because you seem to be more focused with nitpicking everything that Donald Trump has said rather than acknowledging that apartment complexes in the United States of America are being taken over by violent gangs. I worry so much more about that problem than anything else here. We've got to get American communities in a safe space again. And unfortunately, when you let people in by the millions, most of whom are unvetted, most of whom you don't know who they really are, you're going to have problems like this. Kamala Harris, 94 executive orders that undid Donald Trump's successful border policies. We knew this stuff would happen. They bragged about opening the border, and now we have the consequences, and we're living with it. We can do so much better, but frankly, we're not going to do better, Martha, unless Donald Trump calls this stuff out. I'm glad that he did.
What can you even say to that, man? All but the most intellectually corrupt tribalist leftists are going to hear something like that, and they're going to find themselves siding with the Trump candidacy. I mean, there's no natural way to watch that and think that what we need is more of the same, that what we need is more Kamala Harris. It's just not possible, right? But what they're saying just doesn't make sense, right? Especially when you put it up against the messaging from the other side. I mean, they don't have real plans. They don't have real ideas. They don't have real goals. I mean, their only goal is to win. All they want is power. Donald Trump wants to save America, and he's laid that out in many, many different ways. The left only wants to save themselves. This is all they have left.
Is that we have long known that Donald Trump has revered the Nazis. He has revered Hitler. He's read his book. He used to say he had it on his nightstand. Donald Trump has had a very sinister philosophy, wanting to be a dictator, absolutely dividing people up based on who they are, based on factors about them that have to do with their race and their gender, etc. And when he uses language like this, I don't think that it's a Freudian slip. I think that the danger of a Donald Trump is that he would absolutely try to exterminate an entire group of people because he thinks that their genes are somehow different than his and faulty. And I say this with all the sternness that you hear in my voice.
They're still running the same play, man. They're still running the same play that they've been running for a decade, right? I mean, they've changed a little bit. The only thing they've changed, they've transitioned from Donald Trump doesn't read, Donald Trump's too dumb to read, to now he reads Mein Kampf. He's got Mein Kampf sitting on his bedside table, right? And honestly, these people are serious, man. They think that the people that they're trying to reach are just that damn dumb, right? They think that the people watching these shows are stupid and that they're going to believe every word of this. I mean, and they think that people are going to be scared to the polls, but it's not going to work, man. It can't work. People have just seen enough. People have heard enough. And they aren't going to vote for someone that they don't know, no matter how bad they're told the other guy is.
LaQuint Dickey voted for Obama twice. Since then, he's switched to Trump over Harris.
She hasn't answered anything about any of her policies, any of them. So there's no clear line of what her policies are.
This guy is not alone, man. I mean, I believe that that sentiment speaks for millions and millions of people, man. People actually take their votes seriously, man. And they're starting to recognize that their vote actually does matter. Now, it matters more now than I think it ever has, right? And people, they recognize that. What we do matters. We tried the adults in the room. We tried no more mean tweets. And now people are struggling more. Our border is more broken and more people are dying all over the world. And hiding isn't going to fix anything.
I don't think that doing softball interviews is going to put this to rest. I understand the point that you're making, but I think the decision that I'm looking for from the Harris team is who are they choosing to sit down with? And is that going to be something where you come away feeling like she took the hard questions, or if this, snowball continues?
No news conferences for Harris, no sit-down interviews. The questions, the coverage hasn't been tough enough. Tom?
Yeah. She's doing interviews with content creators today instead
right.
of,
So let's call it the Harris honeymoon, right? When does the Harris honeymoon end? end, because at some point she's going to have to sit down. She's going to have to do a serious interview. She's going to have to go unscripted, maybe even a full news conference, but it has to happen. She has
to go unscripted, these people say. They were literally begging her, man. All the way back then, they were begging her not to run the basement strategy. They've been begging her basically since her coronation at the convention. What was that? That was 2 months ago, right? They were literally begging her, but she didn't listen, man. Her staff didn't think she could handle it. They didn't think she could do it. She probably didn't think she could do it. And now she knows she's right. But really, I think more than anything else, they didn't think they needed to. They thought that they could get away with it, man. But now I think we know that they recognize that they are losing.
Biden is not on the ballot.
I understand.
And Donald Trump
But
is,
you talked about it.
And Donald Trump
After George Clooney said within a few minutes of talking to President Biden at a fundraiser that he thought this was not the same Joe Biden that we saw on the debate stage.
Donald Trump is on the ballot.
I understand. You met with him at least once a week for 3.5 years. You didn't have any concerns?
I think the American people have a concern about Donald Trump.
Looking back, do you regret the decision to terminate Remain in Mexico at the beginning of your administration?
At the beginning of our administration, within practically hours of taking the oath, the first bill that we offered Congress, before we worked on infrastructure, before the Inflation Reduction Act, before the Chips and Science Act, before the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the first bill practically within hours of taking the oath.
How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have. And you know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but
right
do you,
now,
just a number. Do you think it's 1 million, 3 million?
Brett, let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system.
Just think about this, man. The Democrats ran a soft coup against Joe Biden because they can no longer hide the fact that his brain doesn't work, like it used to at least, because allegedly Joe Biden's brain used to work. So they installed Kamala Harris, and now, literally a few days before the election, she finally gets asked, what part did you play in the cover-up of Joe Biden's brain? I mean, how is it even possible that no one she's talked to up to this point asked her that question, right? I mean, and how is it possible that she's still sticking to the whole, Joe's fine, Joe's a genius angle? That doesn't make any sense, right? That should be the story coming out of this mess. And you got to give credit to Brett Behrman. He actually asked some pretty damn good questions.
A number of experts thought you would say China. The FBI director had said that. But you said Iran. If that's the case, what do you say to critics who look at the actions of your administration and say you're not acting like Iran is the number one threat?
Well, I will tell you most recently, whether it was in April or in October, and then several hours on each occasion, that Iran posed a threat to Israel. I was there, most recently in the Situation Room, in the most recent attack, working with the heads of our military and doing what America must always do.
Critics just say that you either relaxed or failed to enforce sanctions on Iran, allowing all of this money to flow into Iran, like billions.
Let's go back to Donald Trump, who pulled out of a deal that would have actually put Iran in check.
The estimates in billions.
It was during Donald Trump's administration
that Iran regime
that we had an American military base that was attacked, where American soldiers suffered traumatic brain injuries, and Donald Trump dismissed them as headaches, not to mention how Donald Trump has treated and talked about America's military and military service people, calling them suckers and losers,
Hamas,
has diminished the significance.
We're talking over each other. I apologize.
I would like that we would have a conversation that is grounded in full assessment of the facts, which includes, I think this interview is supposed to be about the choices that your viewers should be presented about this election, and the contrast is important.
Yes, ma'am.
And on the subject of Iran, I am offering what should be an important contrast that is presented for folks to make a decision.
Here's the interesting thing about this question, right? And honestly, I think it's the perfect example of liberal logic. She says that everything happening is Donald Trump's fault because under Donald Trump, Iran attacked us. And she says he just blew it off, said it was just headaches, right? Which honestly, if you understand the region, if you understand the posture that we had, our options were to basically play it like we did, which obviously wasn't blowing it off. We didn't blow it off in any way, but either play it like we did, do what we did, or we were going to go to a full war, a real war, which nobody wanted, right? But what Kamala is now saying is Donald Trump ignored an attack and everything that's happened since is his fault. But obviously, a good follow-up question to that would be, if that's what you believe, then why have you befriended and why have you enriched Iran ever since then? I mean, why have you allowed them to drag us and the Middle East closer to world war than we have been in many, 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 many decades? And honestly, I think her brain would have exploded if she was asked that. And if you watch her face through this entire interview, man, she did not want to be there. She doesn't feel like she needs to be there. If you look at her face, I think she feels like she's above it, right? But I think she also recognizes that she has no choice. She knows that she's losing. And now there's even rumors that her next stop is going to be Joe Rogan. And honestly, there's no way that goes well.
Video, her saying Elon's going to have to follow the same rules as Facebook.
What rules? You can't say that you have one rule for Facebook and you have a different rule for Twitter. They are directly speaking to millions and millions of people without any level of oversight or regulation. And that has to stop.
That's crazy. You have First Amendment rights of free speech. What's really wild is the Babylon Bee had a hilarious little caption. They said, when I get in office, I'm going to change things, says the woman who's in office right now. Because she's in office. Yeah. She's talking about fixing all these things. Yeah. Like, hey,
from
you're
day one,
literally the vice president.
Did
Did you see the thing where Trump came out and said that he was going to stop taxes for tips of hospitality workers and you wouldn't tax them on tips anymore?
Yeah, that was like a month and a half ago.
Yeah, and then she came out and said she's going to do it. Right. And she's going to stop tips. And everybody cheered as if it was her idea. But here's the problem. In 2022, she was one of the deciding votes to go after people that were not reporting their tip. You know, so everybody forever was like, Kamala Harris is the worst vice president. She's the least popular vice president of all time. And then in a moment in time, all of a sudden she's our solution. She's our hero. Everybody's with her. All these social media posts about her. Try Googling a negative story on her. You won't find one.
So,
ta-da!
Okay. Here's the thing about Joe Rogan, man. You know, I don't believe Joe Rogan is trying to get fully involved in the presidency. I don't think he's going to try to ruin or try to help either candidate. But he is a smart guy, and he is beholden to literally no one. So if she does go on his podcast, you know, that's the white flag. That's her waving the white flag right there. And I think she knows she's finished. And honestly, I think if she doesn't feel finished by the time she sits down to talk with him, I think she's going to feel pretty finished by the time it's over, because I really do feel like it's over, man. But we'll see. I mean, we'll see. Stranger things have happened. Crazier things have happened. You never know what's going to happen. All I do know, guys, is we have got to find a way to win. So you guys, we got to vote. We got to take everyone we know to vote, and we got to share these videos, man. These are just some small things that we can do. But that's all I got, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you haven't already, be a part of our growth. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, share the channel. I'll see you in the next one.
Question to you is, what is your plan to improve the medical system?
Look, I come from the middle class. My mother was a working woman who raised me and my sister. My mother was able to finally, she saved up to be able to afford to buy a home by the time I was a teenager. I know everyone has ambition, works hard, has aspirations, but doesn't necessarily have all the resources that other people have.